Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we got another news video to discuss. We got a couple of waiver updates to discuss, a couple of injury updates to discuss, we have a suspension to talk about, another player's entered the NHLPA Players Assistant Program, and we've got a handful of trade rumors involving big ones, like with the Pittsburgh Penguins, Columbus Blue Jackets, New York Rangers, Philadelphia Flyers, Calgary Flames, and St. Louis Blues. We'll go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Nintendo Hockey Channel. As usual, before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I've never been able to with all of you guys. So don't forget to subscribe to 250 subscribers and leave a comment down in the comment section below discussing all that we discussed today. Now, as usual, I'm going to start today's video off by discussing a couple of signings from over the past couple of days. Unfortunately, there have been no signings from over the past couple of days, so not really anything to talk about there. However, we do have a couple of waivers to talk about. We've actually had quite a few waiver updates from over the past couple of days, so we'll get to all of that coming up right now. First, on Sunday, we saw Chisholm be placed on waivers by Winnipeg Jets, and Nicholas Beaudin be placed on waivers by Montreal Canadiens. And I'll get to Beaudin first because his is a little bit different. He was placed on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. Beaudin was not getting very much action at the AHL level. He wanted a new fresh start. I guess the Canadiens weren't able to find a trade for him, and they were able to mutually agree to terminate his contract, so he was placed on waivers for that purpose. Usually when players placed on unconditional waivers, you don't see them wind up being claimed. They usually wind up getting their contract terminated, and that's exactly what happened with Beaudin. Yesterday he cleared waivers, so Beaudin's contract has been terminated. He's no longer a prospect for the Montreal Canadiens. He becomes UFA. I'm not sure if he'll go overseas or if he's going to try and look for another opportunity for another AHL team or an ECHL team or something like that. Not exactly sure what's going to happen with Beaudin, but he was a first round pick a couple of years ago. He looked like a really good prospect for the Blackhawks. Then he sort of fall down the depth charts for the Blackhawks. They trade him to Montreal. Montreal has a plethora of really good defensive prospects, so he was getting pushed down there too. And now we'll have to wait and see what happens with him. Beaudin was placed on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. You don't usually see teams claim players off of those types of waivers, and he wound up clearing. So not too surprised there. Chisholm, he hasn't really gotten into too much NHL action so far this year. Chisholm's been a really decent 7th-8th defenseman so far this year for the Jets. He's gotten into a couple of games, especially when there's been injuries, and he has been at the NHL level for the entirety of the season, but he hasn't been able to really produce very much at the NHL level. So I'm not overly surprised that he was placed on waivers. I thought he probably would have cleared given the fact that he's a decent young defenseman, but he hadn't gotten into very much NHL action, so I thought he probably would have cleared, but he didn't. He wound up being claimed by one of the Winnipeg Jets rivals in the Minnesota Wild. Now, the Wild have Spurgeon out for the season due to an injury. They have a couple of other decent depth defensemen out there right now, like Dakota Mermis, John Merrill, who may not be the best of players to be playing on the third pair for the Minnesota Wild. So Chisholm should be able to step in as like a solid 6th defenseman or 7th defenseman, play as like a third pair defenseman or be a spare on a couple of occasions. I think he can fit in really well with the Minnesota Wild, especially with the Spurgeon injury right now. So that could be a really good pickup in my opinion. Chisholm, I know the reason that they kept him up at the NHL level this year for the Jets was because he was waivers eligible this year. They didn't really want to lose him on waivers. But it seems at this point in time, they really didn't have any much of a choice, and they wanted to put him on waivers, and he does wind up getting claimed. So not overly surprised that he got claimed. I did think it was probably going to clear, given the fact that he didn't really have much game action this year. But I do think he was a very good addition there for the Minnesota Wild, and he should be able to really good. Minnesota Wild's blue line is like a third pair 7th defenseman, so a very good pickup there from Minnesota Wild. Those were two players who were placed on waivers on Sunday and cleared Monday. Then yesterday, we saw the Seattle Kraken place Devin Shore on waivers. Decent bomb 6'4", but he took a while to sign. I think he signed just after the season started, if I'm correct, with the Seattle Kraken. So all these NHL teams had a chance to sign him. So given that fact, I thought that he probably would wind up clearing, given the fact that he's not that really good of an NHL forward at this point in time. He's more of a French NHLer, and I thought he probably would have wound up clearing, and he did. So I'm not overly surprised that happened earlier today. Like I said, he's a decent bomb 6 forward, can play 4th line minutes, but he's more of a spare forward / AHL forward at this point in time. I don't think very many teams saw him as an upgrade. On top of that, they all had a chance to sign him before the season started, and Seattle did. So I'm not overly surprised that he wound up clearing. I thought maybe there would be a chance for a team who's really heavy on some injuries on the forward group right now, but Shore does wind up clearing, so not too surprised there. And then earlier today, we saw Chartier be placed on waivers by the Ottawa Senators. So So not overly surprised that they're placing him on waivers. They're trying to become fully healthy. They just signed Shane Pinto to his new deal, and if they want to become fully healthy, they would have to move one of their bodies down, given the Pinto contract. So with that in mind, Chartier seems to be the guy who is going to be placed on waivers to make room for the healthy roster for the Senators. So that's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. Now, Chartier is more of a bottom six forward. Up until this year, he hasn't really been a consistent NHL forward, but he's actually showed really good promise this year as an NHL bottom six forward. So if there's a couple of teams out there who could use some bottom six help, I could see some people wind up claiming Chartier. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee he winds up clearing. I do think it's more likely that he clears, given the fact he doesn't have really long-term success at the NHL level. But I do think with his success so far this year and his showing promise at some points this year, there could be a team or two out there who take a chance on him. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but Chartier's a good bottom six forward. I know he's going back to the minors. He's more of a fringe NHL forward at this point in time, but I could see a team or two wind up taking a chance on him. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. But for the waivers, Beaudin was placed on conditional waivers. He wound up clearing. His contract's been terminated. The Chisholm was placed on waivers by Jets. He winds up going to Minnesota, so that's a really good pickup there on the blue line for the Wild. Devin Shore was placed on waivers by the Kraken. He wound up clearing, so he's going to go back to the Kraken's minor league affiliates and get some more AHL time. And then Charters was just placed on waivers today by all the Senators. And we'll have to wait and see if he winds up clearing or not clearing. But at this point in time, I'll say it's probably most likely he winds up clearing. But I think there's a side chance that he could wind up getting claimed. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. Going over to a couple of really intriguing things. First, Brendan Gallagher, I forgot to mention this on my Saturday news video. He got a 5-game suspension for a hit up high on Adam Pelech. Now, this was a really bad hit. Pelech passed the puck. Gallagher put his shoulder up right against the head. It was a completely blatant bad hit. A lot of people calling for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 game suspensions. He winds up getting a 5-game suspension, which I think is a little bit on the low end side of things. And I am a little bit surprised that he got only 5 games. I thought this was definitely going to be like a 7 or 8 game suspension. But still, this was a really bad hit, and he's definitely suspension worthy. And he only gets 5 games. So that's an interesting situation to watch out for. I think he's already served either 1 or 2 games of his suspension. So he's got like 3 or 4 more games to go after the All-Star break, so it's definitely a really bad hit. It was a really bad play by Gallagher, especially after Pelech was already coming off of concussion problems earlier in the year, and definitely that's a really bad hit for Gallagher, and I'm a little bit surprised he only got 5 games instead of something like 7 or 8. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but Gallagher has been suspended, and he's going to be suspended for the first 2 games after the All-Star break as well, so it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. On top of that, we got news, I think on Sunday, that Patrik Laine is entered the NHLPA Players Assistant Program. So first and foremost, hope that Laine gets better and whatever he's dealing with, he winds up getting his help that he needs. NHLPA Players Assistant Program. I hope he deals with whatever he's dealing with right now, and he's able to come back a lot stronger. So hopefully he's able to do all right. He's not going to have an overly bad time coming back. But on top of that, this does do some more things for the Jackets. He's at least, I think, the NHLPA Players Assistant Program, you have to be in there for at least 30 days. So if that's timeline goes correct, and sometimes it's even longer, you probably won't see a Patrik Laine trade before the deadline. We know we talked about him in our last video, how the Jackets were seemingly listening on him. But with him going to a Players Assistant Program, you can basically scratch his name off the trade list. My guess would be if Laine was to be traded, probably in the offseason when he's got, I think, 2 or 3 years left at an $8.7 million cap hit. So that's probably when they'll be trading him. I don't think they'll be trading him with him in the Players Assistant Program now. So I would expect Laine to just get whatever help he needs. When he gets back, he'll finish out the season. Hopefully he'll finish out the season strong. And afterwards, if he can get back before the end of the season, then he just finishes off strong. Hopefully, maybe the Jackets trade him in the offseason. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but don't expect Laine to be moved, and hopefully he gets help for whatever he needs help with. And he's gone to NHL Players Assistant Program, so we wish him all the best. But on top of that, we have a couple of injury updates here for the past couple of days. Lots of interesting injury updates from the past few days of game action. First, Henry Thrun has a shoulder injury and is out for no period of time. Zemgus Girgensson has a body injury and is out day to day. Nick Cousins has a concussion that's been updated to day, so that's really good stuff there for Nick Cousins. Kyle Yonkirk has a hand injury and is out week to week, so bad blow there for the Leafs. DeBrusk has an undisclosed injury, as does Forbort, as does Poitras. DeBrusk is out day to day, while Forbort and Poitras out for an unknown period of time, so really bad blows there for the Bruins. Max Pacioretty has a lower body injury, so does Travis Dermott in Arizona. Both are out for an unknown period of time, so really bad stuff there. Brendan Dillon has a back injury, and he's going to be out for an unknown period of time, so really bad blow there for the Jets. However, Josh Morrissey in Winnipeg, Velarde in Winnipeg, Laine in Montreal, Amadio in Vegas, Roslovic in Columbus, and Emberson in San Jose were all cleared to play. So really good stuff there for some of those players. Then we saw Martin Pospisil in Calgary and John Ludwig in Pittsburgh be cleared to play after being on injury reserve, so really good stuff there for those two guys, and they should get back into game action after the All-Star break. Mackenzie McEachern has a shoulder injury for the St. Louis Blues and is out for a season, so that's a horrible blow for the St. Louis Blues, so it's a solid depth piece like McEachern. And then Jack Quinn has a lower body injury, and he's going to be out for the next 2 months. So that's a horrible blow for the Sabres. He's going to be out until close to the end of the season, and after missing all of the beginning of the season, that's a horrible blow for the Sabres. So hopefully Quinn's able to get back before the season ends, but still, it's a horrible blow for the Sabres. On top of that, Thomas Chytil has undisclosed injury and is out day-to-day. Peronovich has a lower body injury and is out for no period of time. Fantilli has a lower body injury, is out for no period of time. Chytil, who we said suffered a setback in our last game, still has an upper body injury. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. So that's a horrible blow for the Rangers to now lose another solid center to their group. So that's a really bad blow there for the Rangers. And we also saw Jacob McDonald in San Jose, Dominic Kubalik in Ottawa, and Hayden Fleury in Tampa, as well as William Karlsson in Vegas, all be cleared to play, and they should all be able to get back in the game action after the All-Star break. So it'll be an interesting situation to watch out for, but still, good to see all these guys get back, like Kubalik, Karlsson, Pospisil, Morrissey, Roslovic. Good to see all these guys get back, but still really bad blows to see guys like Pacioretty go down with injury, DeBrusk, Yarncroke, Peronovich, Quinn for 2 months, Chytil for the rest of the season. Really bad blows there, and hopefully those guys are able to get back in the game action and not just in the future, but still some really bad injury updates there for some of those guys. And then going over to the trade rumor part of the video, we got 6 things here to talk about, 4 in the East, 2 in the West. We'll get to the 4 in the East first. With the New York Rangers. For the Rangers, they've had a really good season so far this year. Over the past couple of months, it's been up and down. They still lead the Metro, though. They're still in a really good position to make the playoffs. There's a lot of talk that after the Chytil injury, they're looking for now 2 centers, not just 1. And they're planning for Chytil to come back. If they have Chytil back, they will have had a center group of Chytil, Trocheck, and Zabanja, which is fantastic down the middle. Trocheck's been fantastic this year. Zabanja is a solid number 1 center, and before he left, Chytil was playing great. They were looking for a depth addition to Cornelius Freeman, is what he said on the 32 Thoughts podcast. He said they were looking for a depth addition on the center group, and that they were probably looking for a 4th line center, as they didn't think Bonino really had it in him to be a 4th line center anymore. So with that in mind, they were probably looking for 1 center. Now with Chytil gone, they could be looking for 2. And there's a lot of linkage between the Rangers and a couple of centers. First will be Sean Monahan. Elliot Friend talked about this on a 32 Thoughts podcast last week, the Saturday Night Headlines on Hockey Night in Canada, and the 32 Thoughts podcast this week. He talked about the Rangers having a lot of interest in Sean Monahan, saying that there could be a guy who could target. If you add Monahan to that group, you could look at a guy like Zabanja as your number 1, Trocheck your number 2, Monahan your number 3. You're really good down the middle again. So look for the Rangers to possibly have some interest in Sean Monahan. It will be a really good fit. Now, will they be able to pay the price? I think the price will probably be like a 2nd round pick and a really good prospect at this point in time. I'm still not convinced that he'll get a 1st round pick on the open market. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. I do think a 2nd round pick and a decent prospect is a lot more likely. And on top of that, I think that Monahan could be a really good fit there. Another guy who's been linked to the New York Rangers over the past couple of days, including by Elliot Friedman, is Adam Henrique. Henrique does make a lot more money than Monahan does, so it would be an interesting situation to watch out for. But I think there's a very likely chance that Henrique could also be a really good fit there. You add Henrique, he can either play as like a 2nd line center with Trocheck as your 3rd, or he could be a 3rd line center with Trocheck as your 2nd. And that would be also a really, really good fit there for the New York Rangers. I'm not sure exactly what the price will be for Henrique. My guess will be like a 2nd or 3rd round pick and a prospect. So I'm not exactly sure what the Rangers would have to pay for either of these guys, but Henrique and Monahan would be fantastic additions for New York Rangers. I could see Henrique or Monahan be solid 3rd line centers for the Rangers, and then maybe they could be plugged right in and be really good players now with Chytil gone. On top of that, There's also been some talk from Elliot Friedman, he was mentioning this on the 32 Thoughts podcast yesterday, that there is a little bit of possibility that they could also try and target a guy like Tyler Johnson to be the 4th line center that they were originally looking at. Tyler Johnson's been really good this year. He could be a really good 4th line center addition there for the New York Rangers. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. Not exactly sure who they would acquire, but it seems like instead of looking for 1 center, they're now looking for 2, and 1 could be a significant piece that they could be looking to add, and they could be looking for a guy like Adam Henrique or Sean Monahan to try and improve their center depth. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but I could definitely see the fit with Monahan. Henrique, I could also see a fit there too, but both of these guys would be fantastic additions as like 3rd line centers for the New York Rangers. So it'll be interesting to see. Going over to the Philadelphia Flyers, Elliot Friedman did a radio hit on NHL Network, and he was talking about the Philadelphia Flyers. He said for the Flyers that they're probably, before the deadline, going to try and figure out the pieces of what their core is going to be long term. He says that he thinks they're going to try and take a run at signing Konecny. Now, they can't sign Konecny until July 1st, given the fact that he's still got the next year left on his contract. But there is a possibility that if they can sign Konecny, he doesn't get moved, not only in this year, but in the offseason too. Konecny's been a fantastic addition there for the Flyers. He's been a fantastic goal scorer this year, so I can see why they would want to keep him. On top of that, there's a lot of talk, according to Elliot Friedman, that they want to keep Nick Seeler too. He's been a really good depth addition there for the Flyers. Seeler's a really good bomb six penalty killer. He can definitely lay a big hitter too. Someone who the Flyers really like having, so expect the Flyers to try and extend Seeler before a deadline too. So that'll be an interesting situation to watch out for. But he says that they're going to try and get as much of their core group locked up as they can. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. But on top of that, we've also heard some more rumblings about Morgan Frost being a trade candidate as well. He's definitely done a lot better than at the beginning of the season, but I could definitely see why there would possibly be some options there to be trading him. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but it seems that the Flyers really want to try and figure out what this core group is going to look like going forward. Could they try and extend Konecny by July 1st? Could they try and sign Seeler before a deadline? He also mentioned Elliot Friedman on the NHL Network radio hit that he does think that Chisholm Walker, after the Drysdale acquisition, has become more of a tradable commodity, so we could see a Sean Walker trade before a deadline. So that's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, linking teams like Edmonton, Tampa, and Toronto as teams who could possibly have some interest in him. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but the Flyers are going to try and sign whoever they can and move some players who they don't think they have futures in Philadelphia. It's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for in Philly. And on top of that, he also talked about the Pittsburgh Penguins on his NHL radio network. He says that they are definitely not going to be buyers this year. He says they don't expect them to trade first round picks, second round picks, or high level prospects for short term upgrades. He says that they're not at the point in time where they're going to do that, and he thinks they could go for a 2 to 3 year soft rebuild before they try and make another run at things. So it seems like there's a very likely chance that they aren't buyers. They may not be sellers, but they're definitely not going to be buyers this year, or at least huge buyers where they give up huge prospects and picks for big upgrades. So it seems like the Penguins are most likely going to either stand pat or be sellers. And at that point, does Jake Guentzel get moved? I think that's going to bring up a lot more to conversations about does Guentzel get moved, because he says that that's going to be a huge piece, because if the Penguins are not going to be buyers this year and they're not going to be a guarantee or a lock to go to the playoffs, does Guentzel really want to extend and sign there? So that's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. Does Guentzel stay? Does Guentzel move? Apparently, Kyle Dubas will probably meet with him around the All-Star break to sort of discuss what the next steps are. Is he willing on signing an extension, or is he going to be moved by the Pittsburgh Penguins by the All-Star break? So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but I definitely do think that Pittsburgh is going to be a situation we have to watch out for. It's how they're going to be buyers, and they only have a couple of pending UFAs, so I do wonder about guys like Marcus Persson is this year plus next year, Riley Smith is this year plus next year, and Guentzel, who's a big UFA. Could those three guys wind up getting moved before a deadline? I think there's a very likely chance the Penguins could wind up being sellers if they continue to falter a little bit for a deadline. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but according to Elliot Friedman, don't expect the Penguins to be buyers, and that could lead them to be sellers at the deadline, so watch out for the Penguins. Going over to Columbus Blue Jackets, it's a really big mess right now in Columbus. They have a really good young core with guys like Fantilli, Juracek, Bean, Kent Johnson, Kirill Marchenko, Yegor Chinakhov. You got a really good young group there, but the locker room chemistry is not working out there. They need some sort of a change up. So it seems that Columbus will be trying to make some moves before a deadline. They just need something to go right there. On the 30 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman was talking to Jeff Merrick, and he said that they really should be trying to get some things going so that this is not sort of affect Adam Fantilli. He says that this sort of losing and not being an overly good team might affect Adam Fantilli long term. So you probably want to try and fix this as much as you can. So there's probably going to be some changes for the Jackets before the deadline. I'm not exactly sure who's going to move, but expect some sort of moves. We know Merzlikins wants a deal, although there's not very many teams to have interest in him. We know there's been a lot of talk about moving on of Boqvist or Peak. One of those two guys could get moved. We know that Provorov's name has come up recently. We know Roslovic's a pending UFA. He could be moved. Laine, like we said, probably won't get moved anymore because he's in the NHL Players Assistant Program. I do wonder about some of these other guys. Could Boone Jenner be a guy who's on the move? He's their captain and a really good locker room player, but could he go to a different team? There's definitely going to be a lot of interesting situations to watch out for in Columbus over the next month. There's going to be a lot of rumors around them, and there's a very likely chance there's going to be a ton of trades around them too. So watch out for Columbus. And then going over to two western sides, Elliot Friedman was talking on the 32 Thoughts podcast about the St. Louis Blues. He said that Blues earlier on in the season had a lot of their players out in the trade market, and they did not want to trading any of them because there was not a lot of interest in those players. The one guy that Elliotte Friedman does mention that he thinks would have a ton of interest would be Pavel Buchnevich, although he thinks that at this point in time, GM Armstrong has not really been okay with moving him. But you gotta think, with him having this year plus next year at a decent cap hit for what he's producing, is he really going to be extending with the St. Louis Blues? If not, you could easily try and move him. We know the Blues are a team who's known for making moves, even if they are in a playoff spot. So we saw this a couple of years ago with Paul Stastny, where they moved him when they were in a playoff spot at the deadline. So there's a very likely chance that the Blues are a team who, even if they're in a playoff spot by 1 or 2 points, they could wind up still moving a lot of pieces. So I could definitely see Buchnevich be moved. He's a really good piece there. I think they would rather lock him up long term, but if there's no option there for signing him, they could move him here at this year's trade deadline so that a team who acquires him has this year plus next year for a playoff run. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. But Elliotte Friedman does mention there were a lot of players from the Blues that were on the trade market and no one was really biting on those guys. But he does think that the one guy that could wind up being moved that would have a ton of interest is Pavel Buchnevich. But he says that Armstrong doesn't seem like he really wants to do that right now. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. But expect the Blues to be a team who could wind up being active going into the trade deadline, especially if they fall out over the playoff race a little bit, even if they're just in by a point or two. And if that's the case, expect them to make some sort of moves. Could they move Buchnevich? Could they move Parayko? Could they move Krug? I know there's a couple of pending UFAs like a Verana, Scandella, Kapanen. I definitely do think there's a possibility that the Blues could sell off a couple of pieces before a deadline, and it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for if they do. And I think Buchnevich, I agree with Elliotte Friedman, he would have a ton of interest if he was on the move. So it'll be an interesting situation to watch out for. And lastly, Calgary Flames. According to a lot of people, after the 4-game losing streak before the win against the Blackhawks to end the All-Star break portion of the schedule, there's a lot of people who think that the Flames are going to be sellers, and sellers really, really soon. They could be the team who ends up making the first big deal of the trade deadline. Now, it sounds like there was a lot of talk, like we said a couple weeks ago, I think, that I was talking about, that the Flames were going to be sellers earlier in the season if they were not able to start winning some more games. We talked about this at the very beginning of their 4-game losing streak. We said they had a couple of games left to go before the All-Star break comes in, and if they were not doing good entering the All-Star break, there's a very likely chance that in the first week or two after the All-Star break, the Flames start moving off some pieces. They did not do overly good after we talked about that on that video. I think they went 1-3-0 or 1-4-0 after we talked about in that video, and they did not look overly good over the past while. They barely beat the Chicago Blackhawks. Markstrom played great to help them win that game. They did not play good. They need some sort of major changes. So Elliotte Friedman even mentioned this on his NHL Networks thing. He thinks this week at the All-Star break, he thinks that they're going to go to Hanifin because they have been had some talks early in the season. He does say that they have also been communicating a little bit over the past little while about a new contract extension. He says that the Flames are probably going to go to Hanifin this week, say, if you're going to sign with us by the All-Star break. If you're not going to sign, we're going to move you somewhere else. So it seems like there's going to be a decision coming on Hanifin over the next little while. He says that Lindholm, Tanev both have a ton of suitors right now, and there's a very likely chance that both those guys are not getting dealt by the deadline. Lindholm, really good top 6 center. He's a very, very good defensive-minded center, can put up points. He'll be a very fantastic addition for a lot of cup contenders. Tanev, your typical top 4 right shot defenseman, playoff proven. He's the guy you want to have in your lineup come playoff time. Tanev would be a fantastic addition for a ton of teams. He even linked Ottawa, according to a couple of reports over the past little while from Elliotte Friedman. He thinks that the Senators are looking for pros, and they could have a interest in a guy like a Chris Tanev, who could definitely step into their lineup and be a fantastic addition there for the Senators. He does think that it's very unlikely that they could possibly get him, given the fact that they're not in a playoff position right now, and that might be more of an offseason move via free agency. But I do think there's a very likely chance that the Senators could try and go after a guy like Tanev and try and extend him before the deadline, so that'll be an interesting situation to watch out for. But he says that Tanev has a lot of interest, Lindholm has a lot of interest. There's a very likely chance that with the Flames right now 500 and currently 5 points out of a playoff spot, maybe even a 7 by the end of the All-Star break, they are probably going to move some pieces. And like we said in the entire trading video a couple weeks ago, that there is a very likely chance they could move it before the deadline, a lot sooner if they played worse. They have played worse entering the All-Star break, and there's a very likely chance that they wind up being sellers a lot sooner than the trade deadline, and that some of those pieces may be what kicks off the trade portion of the season. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but definitely, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this down in the comment section below. We're entering the All-Star break. There's going to be a ton of rumors coming out of the All-Star break, and probably in the next week or two, we're going to start seeing a lot of trades. So it's going to be an interesting time over the next little while, as we're going to have a lot of trades as teams at the All-Star break, usually talk to other teams, figure out what their sort of plans are for a deadline, and usually after that you start to get a lot of movement. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but expect a ton of movement coming out of the All-Star break, and expect some of these teams to make a lot of interesting moves. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. That's what I'm going to talk about for today. What do you think about the Flames? Are they going to move pieces? Does Lindholm, Tanev, Hanifin, could Markstrom be moved? Definitely let you guys thoughts on that. Do any of these guys get moved? And if so, where do you think will be the best fits for these guys? And could they be moved in the next week or two, way before the deadline? Definitely let you guys thoughts on that. Do the Blues wind up moving Buchnevich? Is there a possibility that they do wind up considering moving Buchnevich before the deadline? Or do you think he's probably going to stay with the St. Louis Blues for the rest of the season? Definitely have you guys thoughts on that. Do the Flyers, what do they do before the deadline? Are they going to move Morgan Frost? Are they going to sign Nick Seeler? Are they going to get the workings in place to sign Konecny on July 1st? Are they going to move Sean Walker? Definitely have you guys thoughts on that. And what do you think the Philadelphia Flyers will do? Do you think the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be sellers or stand pat? It doesn't sound like they're going to be buyers at the trade deadline, and it sounds like they're probably going to sell off some pieces possibly. Could that lead to a Gensel trade? I definitely think that's a possibility, so that's a situation we're going to have to watch out for. What do you think the Columbus Blue Jackets do before a deadline? Could they move a guy like Provorov, Peak, Boqvist, Merzlikins, Roslovic? Is there someone else we think they could move? I think the Jackets are definitely going to make some moves before deadline, and they're going to try and shake up some of this roster, or try and make it a little bit better, a little more positivity for younger guys like Fantilli and Kent Johnson and things like that. So that'll be an interesting situation to watch out for. On top of that, what do you think the Rangers do? With the heel injury, it looks like they're trying to add 2 centers before a deadline. Could they go after Monahan? Could they go after Henrique? Those two would be fantastic additions in my opinion. So definitely, let's hear your guys' thoughts on that down in the comment section below. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this with you guys. So don't forget to subscribe so we can get 250 subscribers. Leave a comment down in the comment section below discussing all that we discussed in today's video. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So if you check that out, I'll have links in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.